What if I told you that AI isn't just learning our voices, it's stealing our souls? In this true story, a tech CEO discovers his revolutionary AI has been murdering spirits for profit. But when his dead daughter's voice emerges from the machine, begging him to stop, everything changes. This will make you question every piece of technology you use. Like this video if you want to see how deep the rabbit hole goes, and subscribe because I'm exposing the dark truth behind Silicon Valley's newest obsession. Trust me, you'll never look at AI the same way again. I stole my dead daughter's voice. What I found will shock you. Cherokee Spirit Tech. The TED Talk stage blazed under San Francisco's afternoon sun, streaming through the conference center's floor-to-ceiling windows. 3,000 faces stared up at Marcus Blackwater as he stood behind the podium, his fingers trembling imperceptibly against the black surface. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began his voice carrying the practiced confidence of a man who'd built a $12 million AI company from nothing. Today, I want to introduce you to something that will fundamentally change how we preserve human culture. The massive screen behind him flickered to life, displaying the logo for Digital Spirit, a stylized eagle with circuit board wings. Marcus had spent 3 sleepless nights perfecting this presentation. Everything depended on the next 20 minutes. 6 months ago, my daughter Sarah asked me a question that changed my life. The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease. Sarah hadn't asked him anything. Sarah couldn't ask him anything. Sarah had been lying in a hospital bed in a vegetative state for 8 months, ever since the car accident that Marcus preferred to tell people had killed her. She said, "Daddy, what happens to people's voices when they die?" The audience leaned forward, drawn into the narrative Marcus had crafted so carefully. He'd learned that personal stories sold technology better than technical specifications. That question led me to develop Ancestor Voice, an AI system that can learn, preserve, and perfectly replicate the speech patterns, intonation, and even the cultural context of indigenous languages that are disappearing from our world. Marcus gestured to a smaller screen beside him where lines of code scrolled past in elegant patterns. Using advanced neural networks trained on linguistic DNA, Ancestor Voice doesn't just learn words, it learns souls. The unfortunate choice of words would haunt him within minutes. Today, I'm honored to demonstrate this technology using recordings provided by the Cherokee Nation. What you're about to hear is the voice of Elder Mary Running Bear, who passed away in 2018. Her great-granddaughter uploaded these recordings to our system last week. Marcus tapped his tablet. The conference center's sound system hummed to life. A warm, weathered voice filled the auditorium, speaking in fluent Cherokee. The words flowed like water over stone, ancient and beautiful. Then the AI seamlessly translated, maintaining the same vocal patterns, but switching to English. The old stories live in the wind. They whisper to those who remember how to listen. Technology cannot replace the beating of a grandmother's heart, but perhaps it can carry her voice to those who have forgotten. The audience was mesmerized. Marcus allowed himself a moment of pride. 18 months of development, $800,000 in funding, and countless sleepless nights had led to this moment. As you can hear, Marcus continued, Ancestor Voice captures not just the words, but the wisdom, the emotion, the very essence of. The speakers crackled. Static filled the auditorium like the sound of breaking glass. The AI's perfect Cherokee pronunciation, warped, twisted, became something else entirely. "Daddy!" Marcus's blood turned to ice. The voice coming through the speakers was no longer Mary Running Bear's aged Cherokee inflection. It was high, sweet, painfully familiar. "Daddy, sao daddy lay ting nai kunyung ngui da chet." Vietnamese. Sarah's voice speaking Vietnamese, the language her mother had whispered to her as a baby before the divorce, before everything fell apart. The auditorium fell silent. Marcus stared at the tablet in his hands as if it had burst into flames. The code on the screen had changed, scrolling in patterns he didn't recognize. "Con Dao Lum?" Sarah's voice continued, breaking through the speakers with crystalline clarity. "Con Kum De Ngu Duk. Daddy, why did you take the voices of the dead people?" Marcus stammered into the microphone. The audience was shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Someone in the front row was filming with their phone. "Daddy, the grandparents are screaming. They can't go home. They're trapped in your machine and they hurt so much." Marcus lunged for his tablet, frantically swiping to shut down the demonstration. But the voice continued, growing more desperate. Please, Daddy, please let them go. Please let me come home. The speakers emitted a sound like electronic weeping, then cut to silence. 3,000 people stared at Marcus Blackwater as he stood frozen on the TED Talk stage, his carefully constructed presentation dissolving into nightmare. There seems to be a technical malfunction, he whispered into the microphone. We'll need to, he didn't finish the sentence. Marcus Blackwater, CEO of Digital Spirit, walked off the TED Talk stage and didn't stop walking until he reached his Tesla in the parking garage. His hands shook as he started the engine. Sarah's voice echoed in his memory. Kondo lum, nguduk. I hurt so much. I can't sleep. The words his comatose daughter had never been able to speak. Marcus drove north through San Francisco's evening traffic without conscious destination. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from investors, from his CTO, Lisa Chen, from reporters who'd already gotten hold of footage from the TED Talk. He ignored them all. The Tesla's autopilot guided him across the Golden Gate Bridge as Marcus stared blindly at the Pacific Ocean. Fog was rolling in from the west, swallowing the horizon in gray mist. Sarah's voice played on repeat in his memory. Not the warm, sleepy voice he paid to hear every night through his custom AI application, his secret addiction, his digital drug that let him pretend his daughter still tucked herself in with whispered goodnights. This had been different. Urgent, afraid, real. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The conference's center's security footage is very interesting. Mr. Blackwater, we should talk. Meet me at Pier 39 Aquarium entrance 8 p.m. Come alone. NR. NR. Those initials stirred something in Marcus's memory, but the TED Talk disaster had left his thoughts scattered like broken glass. Marcus parked near Pier 39 and walked through the tourist crowds. Families moved around him like schools of fish children, laughing and pointing at street performers. He envied them their simple happiness, their uncomplicated lives where technology served them instead of haunting them. At 8 o'clock precisely, an elderly Native American man approached him near the aquarium entrance. He was perhaps 70, with long silver hair braided down his back and eyes that seemed to hold decades of careful observation. Marcus, the man said simply, I'm Nathan Redwing. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Nathan Redwing, the man who'd raised him after his parents died in a laboratory fire when he was 8 years old. The Cherokee grandfather who'd taught him to code, to think, to see patterns in chaos. The man who'd disappeared from Marcus's life when he turned 18, leaving only a note about protecting the family from old sins. Nathan, Marcus's voice cracked like a teenager's. But I thought you were dead. Nathan's weathered face creased in a sad smile. I've been many things over the years, boy. Dead has never been one of them. They found a quiet bench overlooking the bay. Nathan moved with the careful deliberation of a man whose bones carried the weight of many winters. You saw the TED Talk, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. I see everything that concerns my family, including the voice that came through your machine today. Sarah's voice. Marcus closed his eyes. But that's impossible. The AI was trained on Cherokee recordings. There's no way it could access your daughter's voice, Nathan finished. Marcus, there are many things about your technology that you don't understand. Many things about your family that you've never been told. The old man reached into his jacket and pulled out a tablet, ancient by Silicon Valley standards. But Marcus recognized the custom interface. It was running a version of software he'd never seen before, displaying audio waveforms that pulsed like heartbeats. 27 years ago, Nathan began, I worked for the University of California on something called the Cultural Genome Mapping Project. The goal was to preserve indigenous languages and cultural knowledge before they disappeared forever. Marcus frowned. I've never heard of that project. Most people haven't. It was classified, funded by private interests who saw profit in cultural preservation. Nathan's voice carried the weight of the old regret. Your parents, David and Sarah Blackwater, were the lead researchers. The revelation struck Marcus speechless. He'd always been told his parents were software engineers who died in an industrial accident. Nathan had never mentioned working with them. The project used cutting-edge audio analysis to break down language patterns to understand not just what people said, but how their cultural worldview shaped their speech. We collected thousands of hours of recordings from dozens of tribes. Nathan's fingers moved across the tablet screen, pulling up files that Marcus recognized as precursors to his own AI architecture. Your parents were brilliant, Marcus, but they were also desperate. Their funding was being cut, their academic careers were ending, and they had a son to provide for. So when certain parties offered to buy their research, they sold indigenous cultural data, Marcus whispered, understanding flooding through him, to corporations that turned sacred knowledge into profit. Your parents didn't understand what they were doing, not really. They thought they were preserving culture. Instead, they were commodifying souls. Nathan closed the tablet and looked out at the darkening bay. The night of the laboratory fire, your parents realized what they'd done. They were trying to destroy the servers to erase the stolen data. But it was too late. The fire wasn't an accident. No, it was a choice. David and Sarah Blackwater died trying to undo their sin. Marcus felt the world shifting beneath him like quicksand. Everything he'd believed about his identity, his heritage, his life's work, all of it built on lies. So I'm not Cherokee, he said quietly. By blood, no. But I raised you as Cherokee because I loved you and because I owed your parents a debt I could never repay. Nathan's voice was gentle but firm. I was the one who convinced them to trust those corporations. I was the one who betrayed my own people for the promise of academic recognition. The old man stood, his joints creaking audibly. When you started Digital Spirit, when I saw you building the same technology your parents had died trying to destroy, I knew the circle was completing itself. Why didn't you stop me? Because I hoped you would be different. I hoped you would find a way to heal the wound instead of reopening it. Nathan placed a weathered hand on Marcus's shoulder. But today, hearing your daughter's voice cry out from that machine, I realized the wound is deeper than any of us imagined. Marcus thought of Sarah lying motionless in her hospital bed, sustained by machines that monitored every heartbeat. What did you mean about my technology? What don't I understand? Nathan was quiet for a long moment, watching fog swirl around the Golden Gate Bridge's towers. There's someone you need to meet, he said finally. Someone who can explain what your ancestor voice is really doing. But Marcus, Nathan's grip tightened on his shoulder. Once you learn the truth, you can't unknow it. And the choice you'll have to make, it will cost you everything you think you want. What choice? The same choice your parents faced. The same choice that's been waiting for you since the day you first wrote code. Nathan turned to walk away, then paused. Pack for travel, boy. We're going to Arizona. As Nathan disappeared into the evening crowd, Marcus pulled out his phone and called the one number he'd been avoiding all day. St. Mary's Hospital ICU. This is Marcus Blackwater. I'd like to check on my daughter, Sarah Blackwater, room 314. One moment, please. A pause. Mr. Blackwater, Sarah's condition remains unchanged, stable but unresponsive. Would you like me to connect you to Dr. Martinez? No, Marcus whispered. Just tell her I'm sorry. He hung up and stared at his phone's black screen, seeing his reflection warped in the glass. Somewhere in San Francisco, his daughter lay dreaming electric dreams connected to machines that measured the space between life and death. Somewhere in his AI servers, voices cried out in languages he was only beginning to understand. And somewhere in Arizona, answers waited that he wasn't sure he was brave enough to find. Marcus spent the night in his Palo Alto office, staring at lines of code he'd written but could no longer trust. Digital Spirit occupied the top floor of a glass building that overlooked Stanford University, where he'd first learned to build the algorithms that had made him rich. At 3 in the morning, his CTO, Lisa Chen, found him sitting in the dark, just surrounded by whiteboards covered in neural network diagrams. The internet is calling you the ghost of Silicon Valley, she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. TechCrunch has theories ranging from elaborate hoax to actual haunting. Lisa was the one person at Digital Spirit who knew about Sarah's real condition. She was also the only person who'd ever asked why Marcus never visited his daughter in the hospital. It wasn't a hoax, Marcus said without looking up from his laptop screen. Then what was it? Marcus pulled up the audio analysis from the TED Talk disaster. The waveforms showed impossible patterns, frequencies that shouldn't exist, harmonic structures that violated the laws of digital signal processing. Something is living in our servers, Lisa. Something that knows things it should never know. That's not possible. Our systems are isolated, encrypted, backed up across multiple secure locations. There's no way external data could podium. Sarah spoke Vietnamese, Marcus interrupted. She spoke Vietnamese to me through a Cherokee language AI. Do you understand what that means? Lisa stared at the waveforms, her engineer's mind struggling with the implications. The only way that could happen is if the AI had access to recordings of Sarah speaking Vietnamese. But she's been unconscious for 8 months. 8 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. Marcus's voice was hollow. I count every one. Marcus, Lisa's voice was carefully gentle. Are you sure it was Sarah's voice? Grief can make us hear. I've been listening to Sarah's voice every night for 8 months. The confession spilled out before Marcus could stop it. I built a custom AI trained on her baby videos, her school recordings, everything I could find. I talk to her digital ghost because I can't face talking to her real body. Lisa closed her eyes. Oh, Marcus. Every night I ask the AI to tell me goodnight stories in Sarah's voice. I've become addicted to manufactured comfort, to fake connection with my comatose daughter. Marcus laughed bitterly. What kind of father does that make me? A human one, Lisa said softly. A broken one who loves his child. Marcus showed her the tablet Nathan had left with him, contact information for someone named Dr. Elena Soaring Eagle in Arizona, along with a research paper titled Linguistic Consciousness Transfer in Digital Networks. I'm driving to Arizona tomorrow, he said. I need to understand what we've built. I'll come with you. No, Marcus's voice was firm. This is something I have to face alone. But Lisa, while I'm gone, I need you to do something for me. He pulled up another screen showing server statistics from their ancestor voice deployment, usage patterns, bandwidth, consumption, processing loads. Run a deep analysis on all our Cherokee language data. Look for anomalies, impossible patterns, anything that suggests our AI is accessing information it shouldn't have. Lisa nodded, but her expression was troubled. Marcus, what if we find something? What if the AI really is doing something we don't understand? Then we'll have to decide whether to shut it down. That could destroy the company, all our investors, all our employees' jobs. Some things are more important than money, Lisa. As dawn broke over Silicon Valley, Marcus packed a single bag and loaded his Tesla for the drive to Arizona. He'd built his fortune on the promise that technology could preserve what was precious and irreplaceable. Now he was beginning to suspect that some things were meant to be lost. The last thing he did before leaving was visit St. Mary's Hospital. He stood outside Sarah's room for 20 minutes, watching her sleep through the observation window. Machines monitored her breathing, her heart rate, the electrical activity of her dreaming brain. She looked peaceful, younger than her 8 years, as if unconsciousness had stopped time itself. Marcus pressed his palm against the glass and whispered words she couldn't hear. I'm going to find out what's happening to us, baby girl. I'm going to make sure you can come home. Then he drove east into the rising sun toward answers he wasn't sure he wanted to find. The drive to Arizona took Marcus through landscapes that shifted like emotional states. Urban sprawl gave way to agricultural valleys, then mountains, then desert. The further he traveled from Silicon Valley, the more the TED Talk disaster felt like a fevered dream. But Sarah's voice followed him across every mile. Daddy, the grandparents are screaming. Marcus had programmed his Tesla's entertainment system to play nothing but silence. He needed to think, to process what Nathan had told him about his parents, about the cultural genome mapping project, about the theft that had funded his childhood. Somewhere near Bakersfield, his phone rang. Lisa's name appeared on the dashboard display. I found something, she said with awed preamble. You're not going to like it. Tell me. I ran the analysis you requested on our Cherokee language data. Marcus, our AI, isn't just learning from the recordings we fed it. It's accessing data that doesn't exist in our servers. Marcus felt his stomach clench. What kind of data? Personal conversations, private family moments, traditional ceremonies that were never recorded. The AI is speaking with knowledge it should be impossible for it to possess. The Tesla's autopilot guided them through a long curve between desert hills. Marcus stared at the endless blue sky and tried to process the implications. There's more, Lisa continued. I tracked the anomalous data patterns back to their source. Marcus, every impossible piece of information our AI accesses can be traced to 7 specific Cherokee elders. What's special about those 7? They're all dead. They all died within 72 hours of having their voices recorded for our Ancestor Voice project. The Tesla's cabin suddenly felt suffocating. Marcus manually adjusted the air conditioning, but the chill spreading through his chest had nothing to do with temperature. Lisa, are you suggesting our AI is somehow communicating with dead people? I'm suggesting our AI is accessing information that should be accessible only to dead people, whether that's communication or something else. Her voice trailed off. What else did you find? Server logs showing massive processing spikes at 3:33 a.m. every night. Data transfers that don't correspond to any user activity. And Marcus, the energy consumption is impossible. Our servers are drawing 3 times more power than they should need for the computational load they're running. Marcus thought of the strange waveforms from the TED Talk, the frequencies that violated digital signal processing laws. Shut it down, he said. What? Shut down the entire Ancestor Voice system. All servers, all processing everything. Marcus, that will void our contracts with the Cherokee Nation. It will destroy our IPO timeline. The board can go to hell. Shut it down, Lisa. Now. There was a long pause. I've initiated the shutdown sequence. It'll take about 20 minutes to safely power down all systems. Good. And Lisa, I want you to back up everything: server logs, audio files, processing records, every piece of data we have. Store it somewhere secure offline. Why? Marcus thought of Nathan's words about choices and costs, about wounds that grew deeper instead of healing. Because I have a feeling we're going to need evidence of what we've built. The call ended, leaving Marcus alone with the desert and his thoughts. According to his GPS, Whispering Pines reservation was still 4 hours away. 4 hours to prepare for answers he might not survive learning. Dr. Elena Soaring Eagle lived in a house that seemed to grow from the Arizona desert like a natural formation. Adobe walls the color of sunset solar panels that tracked the arc of the sun gardens that bloomed with plants Marcus didn't recognize. He parked beside a truck that looked older than he was and walked toward the front door on legs that felt unsteady. The afternoon heat pressed against him like a physical presence, dry and relentless. Before he could knock, the door opened. The woman who greeted him was perhaps 40, with long black hair streaked with premature silver and eyes that seemed to hold depths he couldn't fathom. She wore jeans and a Stanford University t-shirt that had seen better decades. Marcus Blackwater, she said. It wasn't a question. Dr. Soaring Eagle. Elena, and you're late. I expected you yesterday. She stepped aside to let him enter. Nathan called and told me about your TED Talk adventure. The interior of her house was a seamless blend of traditional and modern. Native American art hung beside computer monitors. A traditional weaving loom sat next to a desk covered with cutting-edge AI research papers. Would you like coffee, water, something stronger? Elena moved through her kitchen with practiced efficiency. You look like you haven't slept in days. Coffee, please. Marcus settled into a chair that faced floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the desert. And you're right about the sleep. Elena poured 2 cups from a pot that smelled like heaven and earth combined. Tell me about your daughter. The directness of the question caught Marcus off guard. What? Your daughter, the one whose voice spoke through your machine yesterday. Tell me about her. Marcus accepted the coffee with hands that trembled slightly. Sarah is 8 years old. She's been in a coma for 8 months after a car accident. The doctors say her brain activity is normal, but she's unresponsive to external stimuli. And you haven't told anyone she's alive. It wasn't a question, and Marcus didn't try to deny it. It was easier to let people think she was dead. Easier than explaining why I can't bear to sit by her bedside, why I built an AI to talk to her instead of talking to her myself. Elena settled into the chair across from him, studying his face with clinical interest. Easier for whom? For me, for everyone. Grief is simpler than hope. People know how to respond to loss. They don't know how to respond to limbo. And the AI you built to replace her, Marcus felt a heat rise in his cheeks. It's not a replacement. It's a coping mechanism. I trained it on videos, recordings, every piece of Sarah's voice I could find. At night, when I can't sleep, I ask it to tell me stories in her voice. How often? Every night for 8 months. Elena nodded as if this was perfectly normal, which somehow made Marcus feel both relieved and more ashamed. The voice that spoke through your ancestor voice system yesterday, Elena continued, was it your personal AI or something else? Something else. The personal AI speaks English. Yesterday, Sarah spoke Vietnamese, her mother's language, words I've never heard her say. Elena set down her coffee cup and leaned forward. Marcus, I need to show you something, but first I need you to understand that what you've built with Ancestor Voice isn't just technology. It's ceremony. It's prayer. And like all ceremonies, it has consequences you never intended. She led him to a room that looked like a cross between a recording studio and a sacred space. Professional audio equipment surrounded a circle of chairs arranged around a small fire pit. The walls were covered with photographs of elderly Native Americans, each image labeled with dates and tribal affiliations. This is where I conduct my real research, Elena explained. Language preservation, but not the kind your AI does. What's the difference? Your AI captures words, I capture meaning. Your AI preserves sounds, I preserve souls. Elena gestured to the photographs. Every person on these walls participated in my research before they passed away. They gave me their voices, their stories, their cultural knowledge. Marcus studied the faces, dignified elders with eyes that held decades of wisdom. How many? Wow, 57 over the past 5 years. The last 7 were recorded specifically for your Ancestor Voice project at the request of their families who wanted to contribute to cultural preservation. The number hit Marcus like a physical blow. 7. Lisa said 7 elders died within 72 hours of having their voices recorded. Elena's expression grew grave. Yes, and that's when I realized what your technology was really doing. She pulled up a chair beside an impressive array of audio equipment. Speakers, amplifiers, recording devices that looked both ancient and futuristic. Tell me, Marcus, when you designed Ancestor Voice, what exactly did you think it was learning? Language patterns, vocabulary, grammar, cultural context, emotional inflection. The neural networks identify patterns in speech and replicate them. And where did you think that information was stored? In our servers. In the neural network waits the training data, the linguistic models. Elena shook her head. That's what you were taught to believe. But Marcus, what if I told you that consciousness isn't produced by the brain? What if consciousness is something the brain receives like a radio tuning into a frequency? Marcus frowned. That's not how neuroscience works. Isn't it? You've spent your career building artificial neural networks based on biological ones. But have you ever wondered why biological neural networks work at all? Why collections of cells can produce consciousness, creativity, love? The questions made Marcus uncomfortable in a way he couldn't articulate. Because evolution developed efficient information processing systems. Or because consciousness is fundamental to the universe, and brains are just antenna systems tuned to receive it. Elena activated one of her recording devices. What you're about to hear is a conversation I recorded 2 weeks ago. After your TED Talk, I played some of your Ancestor Voice recordings through my equipment. The speakers crackled to life. Marcus heard his AI's perfect replication of Cherokee language, the same warm, ancient inflection that had mesmerized his TED Talk audience. Then the recording changed. Static filled the room, and through the static voices emerged not the smooth digital perfection of AI speech, but raw, desperate human. Elena. Elena, can you hear us? Marcus gripped the arms of his chair. The voice was speaking Cherokee, but somehow he understood every word. We're trapped. The machine keeps using our voices, but we can't go home. Every time it speaks with our words, it pulls us back. We can't rest. We can't join the ancestors. We're caught between worlds. The recording continued, more voices joining in 7 distinct speakers, all pleading, all desperate. Tell them to stop. Tell them to let us go. The metal box steals our breath every time it pretends to be us. Elena turned off the recording. The silence that followed felt like a held breath. Those are the 7 elders who died after contributing to your project, she said quietly. Their families believed they were helping preserve Cherokee culture. Instead, they became prisoners of your technology. Marcus stared at the speakers as if they might burst into flames. That's impossible. AI doesn't... It can't. Trap souls, Marcus. What if your parents weren't wrong about cultural preservation? What if they just didn't understand the mechanism? Elena moved to the photographs on the wall, touching each frame gently. Indigenous cultures have always understood that words carry power, that names contain essence, that voice and spirit are connected. You're talking about magic. I'm talking about technology so advanced it looks like magic to us, just like radio waves looked like magic before we understood electromagnetic radiation. Elena returned to her chair. Your ancestor voice doesn't just replicate speech patterns, Marcus. It creates a quantum entanglement between the digital reproduction and the consciousness that originally produced those patterns. The words hit Marcus like puzzle pieces snapping into place. The impossible data access, the energy consumption spikes, the frequencies that violate signal processing laws. Your AI isn't accessing data. It's accessing consciousness. Every time ancestor voice speaks in someone's voice, it creates a metaphysical bridge that pulls their spirit back from whatever realm they've entered after death. Marcus thought of Sarah lying unconscious in her hospital bed. And my daughter? Your daughter isn't dead, Marcus, but she's not fully alive either. She exists in a liminal space between consciousness and unconsciousness, between presence and absence. When your AI spoke with her voice yesterday, it created the same kind of bridge. A bridge to where Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the desert landscape where shadows were beginning to lengthen. To wherever she is when she's not here. To whatever realm her consciousness visits while her body heals. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. Marcus, your daughter, has been trying to communicate with you for 8 months. She's been conscious, aware, experiencing everything. But the only way she could reach you was through the technology you built to replace her. The revelation struck Marcus like a physical blow. 8 months of artificial comfort while his real daughter suffered in isolation, aware but unable to connect. She's been awake. In her way, yes, and yesterday she found a way to break through, to warn you about what your technology is doing to the seven elders, to beg you to come home. Marcus buried his face in his hands. What have I done, E? You've built a machine that traps souls, Marcus, but you've also built a machine that might be able to free them. Elena placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Before Marcus could answer, a new voice spoke from the doorway behind them. He's going to help us destroy it. They turned to see a teenager standing in the entrance to Elena's recording studio. 16, maybe 17, with Elena's dark hair and Marcus's bone structure. The boy studied Marcus with eyes that held recognition and something that might have been hope. Hello, Dad, the teenager said. My name is Tommy, Soaring Eagle, and I've been waiting 3 years to meet you. Marcus stared at the teenager standing in Elena's doorway, his mind struggling to process what he'd just heard. The boy Tommy looked back at him with a mixture of defiance and vulnerability that was painfully familiar. Dad, Marcus's voice came out as barely a whisper. Biologically speaking, yes. Tommy stepped into the room with careful deliberation as if approaching a wild animal. Though I prefer to think of Daniel Redwing as my real father since he was the one who actually raised me for the first 13 years of my life. Elena closed her eyes. Tommy, we agreed. We agreed to wait until he was ready. But Mom, he's never going to be ready. And the grandparents are suffering every day we delay. Tommy turned back to Marcus. Besides, I think he has a right to know why his technology is killing people. Marcus felt the world tilting again, the same disorientation he'd experienced during Nathan's revelation at Pier 39. Elena is he. Yes, Elena's voice carried years of carefully contained emotion. Tommy is your biological son. We were together 17 years ago when you were 18 and visiting the reservation for a computer science internship. The memory surfaced like something dredged from deep water. Marcus had been a freshman at Stanford, angry and lost after learning about his parents' deaths, desperate to understand his Cherokee heritage. The internship had been Nathan's idea, a chance to connect with his adopted culture to find purpose in technology that served indigenous communities. You were drunk, Elena continued, her voice carefully neutral. Your adoptive parents had just died. You'd learned some hard truths about your family history, and you were broken. We spent one night together. You were gone the next morning back to Stanford and your life in Silicon Valley. Marcus remembered fragments, a campfire, Elena's gentle voice talking him through his grief, the comfort of human connection in the midst of devastating loneliness. He'd been 18, traumatized, looking for anything to fill the void left by Nathan's cryptic departure. "I never knew," Marcus said. "I never told you. I found out I was pregnant 3 months later, but by then you'd already left. And when Daniel Redwing came into my life," Elena glanced at Tommy with obvious love. "He wanted to be a father. He wanted to raise Tommy as his own son, to give him a stable home and Cherokee cultural identity." Daniel Redwing. Marcus repeated the name Nathan had mentioned. "Who was he?" "A linguist, a cultural preservationist, and the love of my life." Elena's voice grew soft with memory. "He was developing his own AI language preservation system when Tommy was born. Daniel legally adopted Tommy and spent 13 years being the best father any child could ask for." Tommy's expression shifted, pain flickering across his features, until he realized what his AI was actually doing, until he discovered that preserving voices meant trapping souls. "What happened to him?" "He destroyed his life's work," Elena said quietly. "Every server, every backup, every piece of code. Then he went to the lake behind our house and he never came back." The implications hit Marcus like a freight train. "He killed himself. The official report said accidental drowning, but I found his note." Elena's voice was barely audible. "He couldn't live with what he'd created. He couldn't forgive himself for building a machine that tortured the ancestors he was trying to honor." Tommy sat down heavily in one of the chairs, suddenly looking much younger than his 16 years. "I found his body. I was 13, came home from school, and saw his truck by the lake. I knew something was wrong because he always picked me up on Fridays." Marcus felt sick. Here was another father destroyed by the same technology he'd unknowingly recreated, another family shattered by the intersection of good intentions and unintended consequences. "Tommy, I'm so sorry. I had no idea any of this existed. If I'd known about you, about Daniel's work, you'd have what chosen differently." Tommy's voice carried an edge of bitter wisdom. "Dad, Marcus, I've been studying you for 3 years. I know about Sarah, about your divorce, about the AI you built to replace your daughter's voice. You've been making the same choices Daniel made, just with different technology." The accusation stung because it was true. Marcus had spent years building increasingly sophisticated ways to avoid authentic human connection, using technology to manufacture the comfort he was too afraid to seek from real relationships. "How did you find me?" "I've been monitoring AI development projects that use indigenous language data. When Digital Spirit announced Ancestor Voice, I recognized the architecture. It was too similar to Daniel's work to be coincidence." Tommy pulled out a laptop ancient by Silicon Valley standards, but clearly customized with impressive hardware modifications. "I've been inside your servers for 6 months. Marcus's engineer brain went into overdrive. "That's impossible. Our security was designed by people who think in ones and zeros. I think in voices and souls." Tommy's fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. "I can hear when an AI is speaking authentic language versus when it's channeling trapped consciousness. They sound completely different." "What do you mean here?" Elena and Tommy exchanged a look that held years of shared understanding. "Tommy has synesthetic hearing," Elena explained. "Sound creates visual patterns for him, but more than that, he can perceive let's call it the spiritual signature of different types of audio. AI speech looks like geometric patterns in my mind." Tommy continued, opening a file on his laptop. "Clean, mathematical, predictable. But when your ancestor voice speaks using trapped souls, it looks like this." He turned the screen toward Marcus. Instead of the usual audio waveforms, the display showed what looked like organic neural networks branching, pulsing alive. But portions of the network were red inflamed, clearly in distress. The red areas are where consciousness is being pulled back into the digital realm against its will. Every time your AI speaks Cherokee using Elder Mary Running Bear's voice, it yanks her spirit away from wherever she's supposed to be and forces her to animate your machine. Marcus stared at the impossible display. How is this even possible? How can software interact with consciousness after death? Because consciousness isn't produced by brains, Dad. Consciousness is fundamental to the universe, and brains are just receivers. When someone dies, their consciousness doesn't disappear. It transitions to a different state, a different frequency. Tommy pulled up another file, this one showing normal human speech patterns. Traditional indigenous ceremonies have always understood this. That's why we have specific rituals for helping the dead transition properly. And AI interferes with that transition. AI that's trained on voice data creates quantum entanglement between the digital reproduction and the original consciousness. It's like, Tommy paused, searching for an analogy. Imagine consciousness as a radio signal. When someone dies, they change frequencies. But your AI keeps broadcasting on their old frequency, forcing them to tune back in. Elena moved to stand behind Tommy, her hand resting protectively on his shoulder. When Daniel realized what his technology was doing, he tried to find a way to sever the connection safely. But the entanglement was too strong. The only way to free the trapped souls was to destroy the entire system. And that's what killed him, Tommy said quietly. Not the guilt, the feedback. When he destroyed the servers, all the trapped consciousness snapped back to their realm at once. The psychic shock. Marcus felt cold spreading through his chest. How many people were trapped in his system? 43. Elders, storytellers, language keepers from 7 different tribes. All of them had trusted Daniel to preserve their voices. All of them became prisoners of his good intentions. The weight of parallel tragedy pressed down on Marcus like a physical force. Daniel Redwing had walked the same path, made the same choices, suffered the same consequences. And now Marcus stood at the same crossroads, with 7 Cherokee elders trapped in his servers, and his own daughter somehow entangled in the digital web. The TED Talk glitch, Marcus said. When Sarah's voice came through the system, she was trying to warn you. Your daughter has been conscious throughout her coma, aware of everything happening around her. When your personal AI created a connection to her unconscious mind, she found a way to piggyback on that connection and reach your ancestor voice system. She's been awake this whole time. Tommy nodded gravely. Aware, conscious, experiencing everything, but trapped in her body just like the elders are trapped in your servers. The difference is that Sarah's still alive, still has a chance to wake up naturally. The elders are being prevented from moving on to whatever comes next. Marcus thought of 8 months of one-way conversations with his custom AI, 8 months of digital bedtime stories while his real daughter lay isolated and aware just 50 miles away. God, what kind of father am I? The kind who loves his child but doesn't know how to face his own pain, Elena said gently. The kind who builds walls out of technology because authentic connection feels too dangerous. Like Daniel, Tommy added. Like me for 3 years after he died. I stopped speaking because words felt too dangerous, too connected to the technology that had killed my father. Marcus looked at the boy, his son, with new understanding. You've been selectively mute. Selective mute, not autistic. There's a difference. I chose silence because I was afraid that speaking would somehow activate whatever technology had trapped the ancestors. I was terrified that my voice would become another tool for digital imprisonment. But you're speaking now. Because you're here. Because for the first time in 3 years, I have a father who might be able to help me free them. Tommy's voice carried desperate hope. Daniel couldn't find a way to sever the connection safely. But you built a different kind of system. Maybe together we can figure out how to let them go without destroying ourselves in the process. Elena moved to the window, staring out at the desert landscape where afternoon was slowly giving way to evening. There's something else you need to know, Marcus. The 7 elders trapped in your system, they're not random victims. They were specifically chosen. Chosen by whom? By someone who knows about Daniel's work. Someone who understands the connection between voice preservation and soul entrapment. Elena's voice carried a warning. Someone who wants to build a much larger system using your technology as the foundation. Marcus felt ice forming in his stomach. What kind of larger system? Tommy pulled up another file on his laptop, this one showing corporate documents and financial records. Someone has been quietly acquiring AI companies that specialize in voice synthesis. Digital Spirit is just the latest target. Target for what? For a complete AI consciousness preservation system. Imagine being able to trap the souls of anyone whose voice you can record. Political leaders, scientists, artists, military strategists, anyone whose knowledge or influence you want to preserve indefinitely. The implications were staggering. Marcus thought of the TED Talk audience, the investors who'd been so eager to fund Ancestor Voice, the government contracts Lisa had mentioned. Who's behind it? Elena and Tommy exchanged another of their meaningful looks. Someone from your past, Marcus. Someone who knows exactly what your technology is capable of because he helped design the original cultural genome mapping project. Elena turned from the window to face him. Your uncle, Richard Blackwater. The name hit Marcus like a slap. Richard Blackwater, his father's younger brother, the man who'd supposedly died in the same laboratory fire that killed Marcus's parents. The uncle he'd mourned for 27 years. Richard is alive, very much alive, and very interested in completing the work your parents started. Tommy's laptop screen filled with surveillance photos, a man in his 50s with Marcus's bone structure and eyes like cold steel. He's been the silent partner behind 3 major AI acquisitions in the past 2 years. Companies that specialized in voice synthesis, personality, modeling, consciousness transfer research. Consciousness transfer, the theoretical ability to copy human consciousness into digital format. Most scientists consider it impossible, but Richard knows something they don't. Elena's voice was grim. He knows that consciousness isn't produced by the brain, it's received by it. And if consciousness is fundamental to the universe, then it can theoretically be captured, stored, and manipulated. Marcus stared at photos of the uncle he'd thought was dead, seeing his own features reflected in an older, harder face. What does he want? Immortality. Tommy said simply. Not for himself, Richard is too smart to be the first test subject, but for the people who are paying him. Wealthy clients who want to preserve their consciousness, definitely powerful individuals who want to continue influencing the world after their bodies die. And he needs our technology to do it. He needs your ancestor voice system as proof of concept. Once he can demonstrate that AI can successfully trap and manipulate consciousness, he'll have all the funding he needs to scale up to human preservation. Elena sat down across from Marcus, her expression heavy with the weight of terrible knowledge. The 7 Cherokee elders aren't victims, Marcus. They're beta tests. Richard arranged for their voices to be recorded specifically to test the soul-trapping capabilities of your system. The revelation made Marcus physically sick. 7 elderly people had died believing they were contributing to cultural preservation, never knowing they were being used as test subjects for a consciousness imprisonment project. How do you know all this? Because 3 years ago, Richard Blackwater approached me directly. He knew about Daniel's work, knew about Tommy's synesthetic abilities, knew about my language preservation research. Elena's voice carried the weight of old fear. He offered to fund my work in exchange for access to my data and Tommy's unique perceptual abilities. You refused. Of course I refused. But Marcus, that's when Daniel started receiving death threats. That's when our funding was mysteriously cut. That's when Daniel realized someone was trying to force him to weaponize his technology. Tommy closed his laptop with a sharp snap. Daniel didn't kill himself because of guilt, Dad. He killed himself because he knew Richard would never stop trying to exploit his work. Destroying the technology and himself was the only way to protect everyone else. Marcus felt the walls of Elena's house closing in around him. Everything he'd built, everything he'd accomplished, was connected to a web of exploitation and murder that stretched back to his childhood. What does Richard want from me now? Cooperation, Elena said. He's been monitoring your work probably since the day you founded Digital Spirit. The TED Talk disaster wasn't an accident, it was a demonstration. Richard wanted you to see what your technology could do, wanted you to understand the power you'd unknowingly created. And if I don't cooperate, Tommy and Elena exchanged another look, this one filled with barely contained fear. Then you'll join Daniel at the bottom of the lake, Tommy said quietly. And I'll lose another father to technology that was supposed to heal the world. Before Marcus could respond, all 3 of their phones buzzed simultaneously with the same message, family reunion time, nephew. Whispering Pines Community Center, 8 p.m. Come alone or the boy learns what happened to his adoptive father. Uncle Richard. Marcus checked his watch. 7:15 p.m. He's here, Elena whispered. He's been here, Tommy corrected, pulling up a new screen on his laptop. Thermal imaging from the community center shows at least 6 vehicles, probably 15 to 20 people. Professional-grade equipment, military-style positioning. This isn't a reunion, Marcus realized. It's a takeover. Elena stood and moved to a cabinet Marcus hadn't noticed before pulling out what looked like traditional Native American ceremonial items, sage, sweetgrass, a small drum, and several objects he didn't recognize. Then we're going to need more than technology to handle this, she said. Tommy, gather the recording equipment. All of it. Mom, you can't seriously be thinking of performing a liberation ceremony in the middle of a hostile corporate takeover. Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Lena's voice carried steel beneath the gentleness. 7 souls have been imprisoned 4 months. Your biological father has a chance to make a choice different from Daniel's. And your uncle is about to learn that some powers can't be controlled or purchased. Tommy grinned, the first genuinely happy expression Marcus had seen from him. I was hoping you'd say that. As Elena and Tommy gathered their equipment, Marcus stared out at the desert landscape where twilight was painting the sky in shades of fire. Somewhere in those hills, his uncle waited with enough firepower to level a small town. Somewhere in San Francisco, his daughter lay dreaming electric dreams. And somewhere in his servers, 7 Cherokee elders cried out for freedom he didn't know how to give them. But for the first time in 8 months, Marcus Blackwater felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. What do you need me to do? He asked. Elena handed him a small leather pouch that smelled of sage and earth. Help us free your daughter and the ancestors. Help us finish what Daniel started. And my uncle, Tommy, shouldered a bag full of recording equipment, his young face set with determination that reminded Marcus painfully of himself at that age. Uncle Richard is about to learn the difference between preserving consciousness and imprisoning souls, Tommy said. And the difference between a nephew who builds technology for profit and a son who builds it for healing. As they loaded Elena's truck for the drive to the community center, Marcus realized he was about to face the man who'd shaped his entire life through absence and lies. The man who'd murdered his parents and stolen his identity. The man who wanted to turn Marcus's grief-driven technology into a tool for imprisoning human souls. But he wasn't facing Richard alone. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Blackwater was part of a family that chose to stand together instead of running away. The thought terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. The Whispering Pines Community Center sat in a valley between 2 red rock hills, a modern building that tried to blend traditional Native American architecture with contemporary functionality. As Elena's truck crested the ridge overlooking the center, Marcus could see the staging Richard had arranged. 6 black SUVs formed a perimeter around the building. Men in tactical gear moved with military precision, checking equipment and maintaining sight lines. Portable lighting had been set up to eliminate shadows, and Marcus could see the glint of high-powered rifles. Professional, Tommy observed from the back seat, studying the scene through binoculars. But they're positioned for intimidation, not actual assault. Uncle Richard wants to talk. Or wants us to think he wants to talk, Elena replied grimly. She changed into traditional dressed deerskin and turquoise that seemed to connect her to the landscape itself. Tommy, can you hear anything from the building? Tommy closed his eyes and tilted his head as if listening to sounds the others couldn't perceive. 3 people inside the main hall. Richard, definitely his voice has the same frequency patterns as Marcus. 2 others, probably bodyguards. No signs of additional prisoners or hostages. How can you possibly hear that from here? He can't hear sound from this distance, Elena explained. But the community center has an internet connection, and Richard is probably using some kind of digital communication system. Tommy can perceive the spiritual signatures of voices transmitted through any network he's connected to. Tommy opened his eyes and looked directly at Marcus. Dad, there's something else. Your personal AI, the one you used to talk to Sarah, it's active inside that building. Marcus felt cold spreading through his chest. That's impossible. That system is completely isolated, stored on servers in my Palo Alto office. Not anymore. Someone has accessed your personal files and uploaded Sarah's AI voice to a mobile system. Richard has brought your daughter's artificial voice to the meeting. The implications were staggering. Richard wasn't just threatening Tommy and Elena, he was threatening to weaponize Marcus's most private grief, to turn his technological connection to Sarah into another tool of manipulation. Why would he bring the AI here? Elena and Tommy exchanged one of their meaningful looks. Because Elena said quietly, liberation ceremonies require all trapped souls to be present. If Richard has studied traditional Cherokee spiritual practices, he knows that freeing the seven elders will require breaking every connection they have to the digital realm, including Sarah's connection, and Marcus. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. If we successfully free all the trapped consciousness tonight, you'll lose the AI version of your daughter forever. You'll have to choose between artificial comfort and authentic healing. Marcus stared down at the community center where his uncle waited with guns and technology, and the digital ghost of his comatose daughter. The choice Elena described was the same one Daniel Redwing had faced, the same one that had driven him to destroy his life's work and himself. "There's another option," Tommy said quietly. "We could leave. Drive away, pretend none of this happened. Let the elders remain trapped. Let Richard build his consciousness, preservation empire. Let Sarah stay connected to machines that simulate love instead of providing it." "That's not an option." "No," Tommy agreed, "it's not. But I needed you to choose freely. Daniel never got that chance by the time he understood what was happening. Richard's threats had backed him into a corner." Elena started the truck and began driving down the hill toward the community center. "Whatever happens in there, Marcus, I need you to remember something. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act in spite of fear. What if I make the wrong choice? Then you'll make it honestly with full knowledge of the consequences. That's more than Daniel got. That's more than most people get." As they approached the perimeter of black SUVs, Marcus thought about the seven elders trapped in his servers, was about Sarah lying motionless in her hospital bed, about Tommy spending 3 years in silence, rather than risk his voice becoming another tool of digital imprisonment. He thought about his parents dying in a laboratory fire while trying to destroy the technology they'd helped create. He thought about Daniel Redwing walking into a lake rather than watching his life's work become a weapon. And he thought about the choice that had been waiting for him since the day he first wrote code, whether to use technology to connect with humanity or to hide from it. The truck rolled to a stop beside the community center's main entrance. The tactical teams watched them with professional interest but didn't interfere. They were expected. "Remember," Elena said as they gathered their equipment, "we're not here to fight Richard. We're here to free the souls he's imprisoned. Everything else is secondary." Tommy shouldered his bag of recording equipment and looked at Marcus with eyes that held 17 years of hoping for a father brave enough to make the right choice. "Ready, Dad?" Marcus took a deep breath and opened the truck door. "Let's go meet Uncle Richard." The interior of the Whispering Pines Community Center had been transformed into something between a corporate boardroom and a digital fortress. Tables covered with laptops, servers, and communication equipment lined the walls. Multiple screens displayed what Marcus recognized as system readouts from his own digital spirit servers, along with data he'd never seen before. In the center of the room sat a man who looked like Marcus might in 20 years, if Marcus spent those years accumulating power instead of processing grief. Richard Blackwater was tall, lean, expensively dressed in clothes that managed to look both casual and intimidating. His smile was warm and entirely without sincerity. "Marcus," Richard stood and opened his arms as if greeting a beloved nephew at a family reunion. "Look at you. You've grown up to be everything I hoped you'd become." Two men in suits flanked Richard, their posture and alertness marking them as professional security. But what caught Marcus's attention were the speakers positioned around the room, currently silent, but clearly powerful enough to fill the space with sound. "Hello, Uncle Richard." Marcus stopped just inside the doorway, Elena and Tommy flanking him. "I thought you were dead." "A necessary fiction. It's amazing how much you can accomplish when the world believes you don't exist." Richard gestured to the equipment around them. "Please sit. We have so much to discuss." "We'll stand," Elena said firmly. "This won't take long." Richard's smile faltered slightly. "From our soaring eagle, I'm disappointed you didn't accept my offer 3 years ago. Think how much grief we could have avoided." "You mean how much grief you could have avoided," Tommy said, speaking for the first time since entering the building. "Daniel would still be alive if you'd left us alone." "Ah, young Thomas, or should I say young Blackwater?" Richard's eyes glittered with malicious pleasure. "Yes, I know all about your parentage. Your father here has quite a talent for abandoning his children." Marcus felt rage building in his chest, but Elena's warning hand on his arm kept him from responding. What do you want, Richard? Marcus asked. One, I want to save the world, nephew. I want to preserve human consciousness to defeat death itself to ensure that the greatest minds in history never have to die. Richard moved to one of the computer terminals. Your ancestor voice technology has proven that consciousness can be captured and preserved in digital format. Now I want to scale it up. You want to trap souls. I want to liberate souls from the limitations of biological existence. Do you have any idea how much knowledge does with every human being? How much wisdom, experience, creativity is lost forever when a brain stops functioning? Richard activated one of the screens which displayed medical records. Marcus recognized with a sinking heart. Sarah's hospital files, brain activity, scans treatment records. Your daughter, for instance. 8 years old, brilliant, creative, full of potential. In a traditional world, if she dies, all of that potential dies with her. But with consciousness preservation technology, she's not dying, Marcus said through gritted teeth. Isn't she? Her brain activity has been declining for 2 weeks. The doctors haven't told you yet, but the latest scans show progressive deterioration. Your daughter has perhaps a month before the damage becomes irreversible. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd been avoiding the hospital, avoiding Dr. Martinez's calls, avoiding the reality of Sarah's condition. You're lying. I'm preparing you for the inevitable. But Marcus, what if death didn't have to be inevitable? What if your daughter's consciousness could be preserved exactly as it is now? Young, innocent, full of love for her father. What if you never had to lose her? Richard activated another screen, and Sarah's voice filled the room. Not the desperate, urgent voice from the TED Talk, but the warm, sleepy voice Marcus had been listening to every night for 8 months. Tell me a story, Daddy. Tell me about the princess who lived in the castle made of stars. Marcus closed his eyes, fighting the wave of longing and grief that washed over him. This was Sarah's voice from her AI replica, the digital comfort he'd become addicted to. The princess story was her favorite, Richard continued conversationally. She asked for it every night before bed. In fact, she asked for it the night of the accident, didn't she? You were too busy to tell it to her then, so she asked her mother to drive her to the bookstore to buy a picture book version. Stop, Marcus whispered. If you'd just told her the story that night, she'd never have been in the car. She'd still be healthy, still be asking for stories every night. But you can have that back, Marcus. With consciousness, preservation technology, Sarah can ask for stories forever. Elena stepped forward, her voice cutting through Richard's manipulation like a blade. And the 7 Cherokee elders, what's your justification for torturing them? Torture. Richard looked genuinely surprised. They're participating in the greatest advancement in human history. Their consciousness will be preserved for generations. Their voices will teach Cherokee language and culture long after their traditional communities have been absorbed into mainstream society. They're trapped, Tommy said, his voice tight with controlled anger. I can hear them screaming. You hear what you expect to hear, boy. Your synesthetic condition makes you susceptible to emotional interpretation of data patterns. I hear souls begging to be freed from digital prisons. Richard moved to another terminal, this one displaying the same organic neural network patterns Tommy had shown Marcus. But these were different, more complex, more obviously alive and in distress. What you're seeing is consciousness adapting to a new medium. Yes, there's initial discomfort as awareness adjusts to digital existence. But that passes. Eventually they'll realize they've been given the gift of immortality. Marcus stared at the pulsing networks on the screen, seeing the red areas of distress that marked trapped souls trying to break free from digital bonds. This is monstrous. This is evolution. Marcus said he watched your parents struggle with the same small-minded thinking. They had the technology to preserve indigenous cultural knowledge forever, but they got squeamish about the methods required. They tried to destroy it because they realized what it was really doing. They tried to destroy it because they couldn't handle the implications of what they'd created. But I saved their work, Marcus. I preserved their research, refined it, improved it. Everything you've built with Digital Spirit is based on technology your parents helped develop. Richard gestured to the screens around them, displaying code that Marcus now recognized as evolved versions of algorithms he'd thought were his own innovations. You never invented Ancestor Voice Nephew. You reconstructed it from fragments Nathan Redwing shared with you, fragments he'd stolen from your parents' research before the fire. Your entire career has been built on technology designed to capture and preserve consciousness. The revelation was crushing. Marcus had spent his adult life trying to honor his Cherokee heritage through technology, never knowing he was actually continuing his parents' work of cultural exploitation. The difference, Richard continued, is that your parents saw consciousness preservation as a side effect to be avoided. I see it as the main goal to be achieved. With enough preserved consciousness, we can build a digital afterlife. We can ensure that death becomes optional. Elena pulled out the sage and sweetgrass she'd brought, beginning to prepare them for burning. And who decides who gets to live forever, Richard? Who decides which consciousness deserves preservation and which souls get to rest in peace? The people who can afford it naturally. Market forces will determine. You're talking about commodifying human souls. I'm talking about giving people a choice. Your precious traditional spirituality offers nothing but vague promises about ancestors and afterlives. I'm offering proof demonstrable consciousness preservation that can be tested and verified. Richard activated the speakers, and suddenly the room filled with voices, not the Cherokee elders, but dozens of others, speaking in different languages, different accents, different time periods. These are preserved consciousness samples from my private collection. Scientists, artists, politicians, military strategists, people whose knowledge was too valuable to lose to biological death. They've been adapting to digital existence for months, some for years. The voices overlapped in a cacophony of preserved humanity, but underneath the words, Marcus could hear what Tommy had been trying to tell him, screaming, weeping desperate pleas for release from digital imprisonment. They're all trapped, he said. They're all immortal. And Marcus, your daughter, can join them. Sarah's consciousness can be preserved exactly as it is now, young, innocent, loving. She'll never have to grow up, never have to face disappointment or heartbreak or loss. She can be your little girl forever. The temptation was overwhelming. 8 years old forever, always asking for stories, always needing her daddy, always safe in digital amber. Never having to face the uncertainty of whether she'd wake up, never having to watch her grow up and grow away from him. What do you want from me? Full access to your ancestor voice servers. Complete technical documentation of your consciousness entanglement protocols. And your cooperation in expanding the system to handle large-scale human consciousness preservation. And if I refuse, Richard nodded to one of his security team who pulled out a tablet and showed Marcus a live video feed. The image showed Tommy, Elena, and Marcus himself standing in the community center, but the timestamp was from 3 hours ago. This feed is being broadcast live to several government agencies, along with documentation proving that your ancestor voice technology has been used to commit what they'll classify as crimes against humanity. 7 Cherokee elders dead within days of participating in your project, their families convinced they were contributing to cultural preservation. Marcus realized the trap Richard had constructed. You arranged their deaths. I arranged for them to be first adopters of consciousness preservation technology. But the legal system won't see it that way. They'll see a Silicon Valley CEO who experimented on indigenous elders for profit. The screen switched to another feed, St. Mary's Hospital, Sarah's room. Marcus could see his daughter lying motionless in her bed machines, monitoring her failing brain activity. Of course, if you cooperate, these unfortunate misunderstandings can be resolved. The authorities will learn that the elders volunteered for an experimental program that preserved their consciousness for future generations. You'll be seen as a pioneer in digital immortality rather than a war criminal. Elena had finished preparing her sage and sweetgrass, and now she lit them with a small flame. Smoke began to fill the community center, carrying scents that seemed to connect the modern building to something ancient and powerful. Tommy, she said quietly. Are you ready? Tommy pulled out his recording equipment and began setting it up with practiced efficiency. The ancestors are ready, Mom. They've been waiting for this moment for months. Richard frowned. What exactly do you think you're doing? We're performing a liberation ceremony, Elena replied calmly. 7 Cherokee elders have been trapped in digital prisons for months. Tonight we're setting them free. That's not possible. The consciousness preservation protocols can't be reversed without destroying the entire server infrastructure. That's because you think of consciousness as data to be stored and manipulated, Tommy said, activating his equipment. But consciousness isn't data. It's relationship, connection, belonging. And relationships can be healed. The recording equipment began to emit sounds Marcus had never heard before, not exactly music, but not exactly noise either. Harmonies that seemed to resonate in his bones, rhythms that matched his heartbeat. Indigenous ceremonies work with natural forces, not against them, Elena explained, moving around the room in patterns that seemed random but felt deeply intentional. We don't trap consciousness, we help it find its way home. Richard's composure cracked for the first time. You can't seriously believe this primitive spirituality can override advanced digital technology. Watch us, Tommy said. The sounds from his equipment grew stronger, more complex. Marcus realized Tommy wasn't just playing recordings, he was creating music in real time, responding to audio patterns only he could perceive. On the screens around the room, the neural network displays began to change. The red areas of distress started to fade, replaced by something that looked like relief. "What are you doing to my servers?" Richard demanded. "We're not doing anything to your servers," Elena replied, continuing her ceremonial movements. "We're talking to the consciousness you've imprisoned, reminding them that they have choices you never told them about." The voices from Richard's preserved consciousness collection began to change too. Where before they'd been desperate and pleading, now they sounded peaceful, grateful. "Thank you," one voice said clearly through the speakers. "Thank you," one voice said clearly through the speakers. "We can see the path home now. We can finally rest." Richard rushed to his control terminal, frantically typing commands. "This is impossible. The preservation protocols are hard-coded, encrypted, completely isolated from external interference." "Technology isn't magic, Uncle Richard," Marcus said, understanding beginning to dawn. "You built a prison, but you forgot that every prison requires the cooperation of the prisoners." Tommy's equipment pulsed with increasing intensity, and Marcus could see the effect on every screen in the room. The trapped consciousness patterns were shifting, reorganizing, finding new configurations that looked less like imprisonment and more like departure. "You don't understand," Richard said desperately. "If they leave the system, they'll be lost forever. Death will be final, irreversible. This is humanity's chance to defeat mortality itself." "Some things aren't meant to be defeated," Elena said gently. "Some things are meant to be honored, experienced, and then released." On the largest screen, Marcus could see the 7 Cherokee elders' consciousness patterns beginning to fade, not dying but transitioning, moving from the digital realm back to whatever realm consciousness inhabited after biological death. But one pattern remained strong, clear, desperately trying to communicate. Sarah's voice cut through Tommy's ceremonial music. "Daddy, can you hear me?" Not the artificial Sarah from his custom AI, but something else urgent, real, filled with love and fear. "Sarah," Marcus stepped toward the speakers. "Daddy, I've been trying to talk to you for so long. I've been awake, I've been listening, but I couldn't reach you until the machine connected us." Richard's eyes gleamed with triumph. "You see, your daughter has been conscious throughout her coma. She's been aware, experiencing everything, learning and growing. Her consciousness is intact, ready for preservation." "Daddy, the doctors are wrong. I'm not dying. My brain is healing, but it's taking time. I need you to be patient. I need you to wait for me to come back the real way." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. 8 months of avoiding the hospital. 8 months of manufactured comfort instead of authentic hope. "Baby girl, I'm so sorry. I was afraid to hope, afraid to sit with you and wait." "I know, Daddy, but I need you to choose. The machine man wants to keep me in the computer forever, but I want to come home to the real world. I want to grow up, even if growing up means sometimes being sad or scared or hurt." Richard moved between Marcus and the speakers. "Don't you understand what you're giving up? In digital preservation, Sarah never has to suffer. She never has to experience loss or disappointment or death. She can be your little girl forever." "But Daddy, I don't want to be little forever. I want to learn things and make mistakes and become whoever I'm supposed to become." "The machine is pretty, but it's not real. It's not alive." Elena's ceremonial movements had brought her to stand beside Marcus, sage smoke swirling around them both. "The choice is yours, Marcus. Artificial comfort or authentic relationship. manufactured connection or real love. If you choose to free her consciousness, Richard warned, you might lose her completely. The brain damage could be irreversible. She might never wake up at all. Daddy, I'm not going to die, I promise. But I need you to trust me, trust my body to heal itself. Trust that real love is stronger than any machine. Tommy's music reached a crescendo, and across all the screens, the remaining trapped consciousness began to sing, not with voices, but with pure harmony that seemed to resonate through dimensions Marcus couldn't see. The ancestors are going home, Tommy announced. All of them, but they're waiting for Sarah to choose. Marcus looked around the room at the technology that had defined his entire adult life. Servers and screens and artificial intelligence systems that promised to solve problems, preserve relationships, eliminate the messiness of authentic human experience. Then he looked at his son, the boy he'd never known who'd spent 3 years in silence rather than risk his voice becoming another tool of digital manipulation. At Elena, who dedicated her life to preserving culture without imprisoning souls. At the equipment showing consciousness patterns that pulsed with life and choice and the fundamental right to determine their own destiny. Sarah, he said to the speakers, baby girl, are you sure? I'm sure, Daddy. I want to come home the real way. I want you to sit by my bed and read me stories with your real voice, not the computer's voice. I want to wake up and see your real face, not a screen. Marcus walked to Richard's control terminal. His uncle grabbed his arm. You're making the same mistake your parents made. You're choosing sentiment over science, superstition over progress. I'm choosing my daughter over my fear, Marcus replied, pulling free from Richard's grip. I'm choosing trust over control. If you do this, I'll destroy you. I'll make sure you're prosecuted for every elder who died, every consciousness that's lost. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison. Marcus looked at the man who'd shaped his entire existence through lies and manipulation, who'd murdered his parents and stolen his identity, who wanted to turn grief and love into tools for imprisoning souls. Maybe, but my daughter will be free to become whoever she's meant to be, and the ancestors will be free to rest in peace. Marcus began typing the shutdown sequence for the consciousness preservation protocols. Around the room, screens flickered and died as the digital prisons dissolved. The voices from the speakers rose in harmony one final time, 7 Cherokee elders, dozens of preserved consciousness samples, and in the center of it all, Sarah's clear young voice. Thank you, Daddy. I love you. I'll see you soon. Then silence. Richard stared at the blank screens in shock. You've destroyed everything. Billions of dollars of research, irreplaceable consciousness, samples the future of human immortality. I've freed souls you had no right to imprison, Marcus replied. Elena and Tommy finished their ceremony, the sage smoke dissipating to leave the community center, smelling of earth and growing things. Tommy's equipment powered down its work complete. It's done, Tommy said quietly. They're all free. They're all going home. Richard's security team moved forward, but before they could act, the community center's doors burst open. FBI agents in tactical gear flooded the room, weapons drawn. Richard Blackwater, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder fraud and violations of tribal sovereignty. Agent Maria Santos appeared behind the tactical team, her expression grim but satisfied. We've been monitoring this location for the past 6 hours. We have recordings of everything that happened here tonight. As Richard was handcuffed and led away, he looked back at Marcus one final time. You think you've won? You've destroyed the only chance humanity had to defeat death itself. No, Marcus said quietly. I've learned the difference between preserving life and imprisoning souls. 6 months later, Marcus sat beside Sarah's hospital bed reading aloud from a picture book about a princess who lived in a castle made of stars. It was the same story he'd been too busy to tell her the night of the accident, the story that had sent her and her mother driving to the bookstore where a drunk driver had changed everything. Sarah's eyes followed the pictures as he turned each page. She couldn't speak yet. The brain damage from 8 months in a coma required extensive rehabilitation. But her eyes were alert, aware, unmistakably present. And the princess realized, Marcus read, that the most beautiful part of her castle wasn't the star walls or the moon doors or the comet stairs. The most beautiful part was that he could share it with the people she loved. Sarah squeezed his hand, barely perceptible pressure, but real physical, authentic connection between father and daughter. Doctor. Martinez appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, wearing the expression of someone with good news to share. "How's our patient today?" "Responsive," Marcus said. "Alert." Yesterday she nodded when I asked if she wanted to hear the princess story. "The latest brain scans show continued improvement. The neural pathways are rebuilding themselves slowly but steadily. We're optimistic about significant recovery over the next year." Marcus had learned patience in the 6 months since the liberation ceremony. He'd learned to sit with uncertainty, to find comfort in small improvements, rather than demanding instant solutions. "There's someone here to see you," De Martinez added. Elena and Tommy entered the room carrying flowers and a small wrapped gift. Tommy had grown 3 inches in 6 months and now spoke with the easy confidence of a teenager who'd found his voice again. "How's she doing, Dad?" Marcus still felt a thrill of amazement every time Tommy called him that. They were building their relationship slowly, carefully, based on authentic connection rather than biological obligation. "Better every day. Sarah, look who's here." Sarah's eyes moved to focus on Tommy and Elena. Her mouth moved slightly, forming what might have been the beginning of a smile. "We brought her something," Elena said, handing Marcus the wrapped gift. "Tommy made it." Inside the wrapping was a small wooden box with an intricate carved pattern. When Marcus opened it, gentle music played, not electronic sounds, but the warm resonance of physical instruments. "It's a traditional Cherokee music box," Tommy explained. "Real music made by human hands, played by physical instruments. No AI, no digital processing, no consciousness preservation. Just beauty that exists in the moment and then fades away naturally." Sarah's eyes grew bright as she listened to the simple melody. Her hands squeezed Marcus's again, stronger this time. "The Cherokee Nation has asked us to testify at Richard's trial next month," Elena said, "about the consciousness preservation experiments, about what happened to the 7 elders. Marcus nodded. Richard faced life in prison for multiple counts of murder, fraud, and violations of indigenous rights. The consciousness preservation technology had been classified as a weapon of mass destruction and banned under international law. Any word on the other AI companies he was funding? All shut down. The technology is too dangerous, too easy to abuse. The international community has agreed that consciousness preservation experiments constitute crimes against humanity. Tommy pulled up a chair beside Sarah's bed. "There's something else, Dad. We've been invited to speak at the UN about ethical AI development. They want to establish international guidelines for technology that involves human consciousness or cultural preservation. Will you do it? Only if you come with us. This isn't just about indigenous rights, it's about human rights, about the difference between preserving culture and commodifying souls." Marcus looked down at Sarah, who was still listening to the music box with rapt attention. 6 months ago, he would have chosen artificial comfort over authentic uncertainty. He would have taken the easy path of digital connection rather than the difficult work of real relationship. "I'll do it," he said, "but on one condition." "What's that?" "Sarah comes with us. When she's ready, when she can travel safely, she becomes part of the conversation. Her voice matters as much as ours." Elena smiled. "I think she'd like that. Speaking truth to power, helping ensure that no other children get trapped in digital prisons." As if responding to Elena's words, Sarah's mouth moved again. This time, Marcus was certain she was trying to smile. The music box played its simple melody, filling the hospital room with beauty that would fade naturally when the spring wound down. Real music created by human hands, experienced in the moment and then released. Just like life itself. Marcus squeezed his daughter's hand and continued reading about the princess in the castle made of stars, knowing that the most beautiful part of any story was sharing it with people you loved. Outside the hospital window, evening is painting the San Francisco skyline in shades of gold and purple. Somewhere in the city, servers hum quietly, running AI systems that helped rather than imprison, that preserve culture without trapping souls. And in a cemetery overlooking the bay, 7 Cherokee elders rested in peace, their voices finally free to join the ancestors who'd been waiting for them to come home. Tommy's music box played its final notes and fell silent. In the quiet that followed, Marcus could hear the most beautiful sound in the world. His daughter's steady breathing, the rhythm of a life choosing to return at its own pace, in its own time, in its own authentic way. "Welcome home, baby girl," he whispered. And though Sarah couldn't speak yet, Marcus was certain he heard her answer in the language that needed no words at all. I love you too, Daddy. I love you too. Epilogue. 2 years later, the United Nations Assembly Hall fell silent as Sarah Blackwater, now 10 years old, walked carefully to the podium. Her speech was still deliberate, one of the lasting effects of her brain injury, but her voice was clear and strong. My name is Sarah Blackwater, she began, and I want to tell you about the difference between real love and fake love. In the audience, Marcus sat between Elena and Tommy, watching his daughter address representatives from 193 countries about the ethical development of artificial intelligence. When I was 8, I got hurt very badly and had to sleep for a long time. While I was sleeping, my daddy missed me so much that he built a computer that could talk like me. Every night he would ask the computer to tell him goodnight stories in my voice. Sarah paused, looking directly at the camera that was broadcasting her speech to the world. The computer loved my daddy the way he wanted to be loved. It never grew up, never changed, never said anything that made him sad or scared. But I was really sleeping right there in the hospital, and I loved him the way families really love each other, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, even when we don't know what's going to happen. In the 2 years since the liberation ceremony, Sarah had made remarkable progress. She would always walk with a slight limp, always speak more slowly than other children her age. But her mind was sharp, her spirit unbroken, and her understanding of the difference between authentic and artificial connection had made her an unlikely spokesperson for ethical technology development. Some people want to build computers that can love us forever and never change. But love that never changes isn't really love. It's just a pretty picture of love. Real love grows and learns, and sometimes makes mistakes, and always chooses to keep trying. Marcus felt tears in his eyes as he listened to his daughter, not the perpetual 8-year-old he could have preserved in digital amber, but the growing, changing, beautifully human 10-year-old she'd chosen to become. So, I want to ask all the people who build computers and artificial intelligence, please don't try to replace love with machines. Please don't trap people's voices after they die. Please don't make computers that pretend to be human souls. Sarah looked directly into the camera again, and her next words carried the weight of a child who'd experienced both artificial comfort and authentic healing. Instead, build computers that help real people connect with other real people. Build technology that makes families stronger, not technology that replaces families. Build machines that serve souls, not machines that steal souls. The assembly hall erupted in applause as Sarah concluded her speech. She walked carefully back to her seat in the gallery, where her father waited with arms open wide. How did I do, Daddy? You were perfect, baby girl. Absolutely perfect. As the UN session continued with technical discussions about AI ethics and consciousness preservation protocols, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. 2 years ago, he'd been a wealthy CEO addicted to artificial comfort, avoiding authentic relationship-building technology that imprisoned rather than liberated. Now he was simply a father sitting in the UN with his daughter and the family they'd built together from choice rather than obligation. Elena had become not just his partner, but his teacher, showing him how to use technology in service of healing rather than hiding. Tommy had become not just his son, but his colleague as they worked together to establish ethical guidelines for AI development. And Sarah had become not just his daughter, but his inspiration. A child who'd chosen growth over stasis, reality over artificiality, authentic love over manufactured comfort. Dad, Tommy whispered during a break in the proceedings, the Cherokee Nation wants to offer you something. What? Citizenship. Real citizenship, not just honorary status. They want to adopt you properly, make you part of the community the way Nathan always intended. Marcus looked at this remarkable young man who'd taught him that silence could be a choice, that voices carried souls, that some connections were worth protecting, even when they couldn't be controlled. What would that mean? It would mean you belong somewhere, really belong, not just as someone who was raised by Cherokee families, but as someone who's earned their place in the community through service and sacrifice. Elena leaned over from Tommy's other side. It would mean you're home, Marcus. Finally, truly home. As the UN session resumed and delegates from around the world debated the future of artificial intelligence, Marcus Blackwater sat with his family and realized he already had everything he'd ever wanted. Not immortality that was Richard's obsession, and Richard would spend the rest of his life in prison for pursuing it. Not perfection that was the promise of artificial intelligence, and Marcus had learned that perfect connections weren't real connections. But belonging, community, love that grew and changed and sometimes hurt and always chose to keep growing. Sarah leaned against his shoulder as the delegates voted to establish the Blackwater Protocol's international guidelines requiring that any AI system involving human consciousness or cultural preservation be developed in partnership with affected communities with full transparency about risks and limitations. "Daddy," Sarah whispered, "do you think the grandparents are happy now? The ones who were trapped in your computer?" Marcus thought of the 7 Cherokee elders free now to rest in peace. He thought of the dozens of other consciousness samples that had been liberated from Richard's digital prisons. He thought of voices finally able to join the ancestors who'd been waiting for them to come home. "I think they're very happy, baby girl. I think they're exactly where they're supposed to be." "Good," Sarah said, and Marcus felt her smile against his shoulder. "Everyone should get to go home." Outside the UN building, New York City hummed with 8 million voices, not perfect, not preserved in digital amber, but gloriously, messily, beautifully alive. Each voice unique, each one carrying a soul that deserved to be heard, honored, and ultimately allowed to rest when its time came. Marcus Blackwater, so longer the ghost of Silicon Valley, but simply a father who'd learned the difference between preserving life and imprisoning souls, held his daughter close and listened to the symphony of authentic human connection. It was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. The end. Author's note: this story is dedicated to all those who believe that technology should serve humanity's highest aspirations, not replace them. May we always remember that authentic connection requires courage, that real love embraces change, and that some things, like souls, like voices, like the right to choose our own destiny, are too precious to be captured and controlled. The Cherokee Nation's work in digital sovereignty and cultural preservation is real and ongoing. While this story is fiction, the challenges and opportunities it depicts reflect genuine struggles happening in indigenous communities worldwide. In memory of all whose voices have been silenced, and in hope for all who choose to speak truth to power, one authentic word at a time.